with the time we have left, back to Church Militant. Christine, tell us the story here that you broke over the weekend.
Yeah, so it's my latest special report. It's called Pennsylvania Predator on the Prowl, and you can come see it at our site, churchmilitant.com. Something that I spent a few months on, but it's a very involved story, but it kind of broke open because of an underage sex sting that took place back in January. There's a man there named Musa Harris. He's known as the Luzerne County Predator Catcher. And what he does is he's essentially a vigilante. He tries to catch pedophiles.
Wow.
And so he nabbed one pedophile who was targeting an underage male, 15-year-old. And what he does is he goes on these online dating apps. He catches these guys that way. And then he shows up, of course, on their doorstep when they're thinking a 15-year-old kid is going to show up to have sex with them. This guy shows up. He gets everything on video, and then he posts it on YouTube.
Wow.
Well, this one caused some shockwaves in the Scranton diocese because the man that he busted happened to be a very long time staffer in the diocese with very close connections to high profile people. It was Ed Loch, longtime organist for many decades in the diocese. His brother was the vicar for clergy. Okay, his brother was the vicar for clergy, which is a very high ranking position in the diocese. And also his home parish is that of Monsignor Walter Rossi. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
He's the rector of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a man who was under investigation in 2 dioceses for homosexual misconduct, just a couple of years ago, or actually just last year. Archbishop Vigano confirmed that he received multiple complaints about Monsignor Rossi when he was papal nuncio, that Rossi preyed upon male seminarians in D.C. But both Cardinal Wilton Gregory and Bishop Joseph Bambera, in spite of voluminous evidence and testimony linking him to these homosexual scandals, and we actually provide some of that documentation, completely cleared Rossi of all wrongdoing. And we have to remember, Cardinal Wilton Gregory is a crony of McCarrick. He was a very long time close associate with McCarrick, handpicked by McCarrick. It's a very big piece that ties in lots of different parts together to show that whatever progress we may have made in 2018 after the Summer of Shame, it really seems to be a lot of these complicit clergy remain very much entrenched and in positions of power, and they still continue to protect their own.
So going back to Scranton, though, Ed Loch, is he still active in the diocese?
Well, what happened was they did suspend him, which is, obviously what they needed to do. They suspended him. They handed things over to the local DA. But the problem is they didn't say a word about anything to parishioners, nothing, zero. And so parishioners were like, why is he suddenly gone? Why is our organist gone? They had no idea. They left his name on the bulletin for more than a month as the organist.
Oh, wow. And
to this day, they will not tell anybody what happened. And this is like, wait a second, this is a sexual predator. He could be targeting Catholics, Catholic kids in the area. He probably has. Why are you not telling anybody? And, several people have asked the diocese that, and they just will not say anything. They just say, well, it's a personnel matter. We will say nothing. So I'm sorry, you can't do that in this atmosphere today.
Do you get the sense that they're trying to protect themselves from litigation?
I think it's both protecting themselves from litigation, but also protecting their inner circle, because Ed Loch was very much part of their inner circle. So I think it's both. It's the point is they're not thinking about the good of their flock.
Sure.
They're thinking about themselves.
Christine, we have about just under 6 minutes before we go to a break and we finish the conversation. But before we go, I wanted to switch over to talk about Monsignor Craig Harrison and the lawsuit going on there. Can you give our audience a rundown? What's going on?
Sure. This is actually very big news. It's something that I've covered extensively, the Monsignor Craig Harrison case out in Bakersfield, California. That's in the Diocese of Fresno. Monsignor Craig Harrison was under investigation by 3 separate DAs, 3 separate police departments out in Fresno, California, for multiple allegations of homosexual misconduct. This is a man who was a very popular, very powerful, beloved priest of a very wealthy parish for many years, about 40 years. And so when people heard these allegations against him, they were very shocked. And he's always proclaimed his innocence. Well, the problem is a number of these victims have come forward. There have been many, I'd say at least half a dozen, all their stories fit together. They're from different places. And two of the local DAs said that they wanted to pursue criminal prosecution, but they weren't able to because the statute of limitations prevented them. Now, Monsignor Harrison has touted that as, oh, I've been completely exonerated. Not true. They just couldn't prosecute because the law wouldn't let them because that's, time limit. What he has done, Harrison, is actually he's filed defamation lawsuits against victims, whistleblowers, against the diocese. He lost his defamation lawsuit against the diocese. The court said this is baseless. And he has smeared all of his accusers and alleged victims. And in fact, disobeyed his bishop. When his bishop told him you can't publicly minister, he would continue to publicly minister anyway. And finally, two accusers have now filed a civil lawsuit against Monsignor Harrison. This just happened last week. And, victims have contacted me saying when they were watching the press conference, excuse me, they were bawling. They were in tears because they said, wow, finally someone is hitting back at this man.
Wow.
It's been two very rough years. We've been smeared and attacked and called out as liars. But now finally, hopefully he'll be facing some justice, not in the criminal courts, hopefully in the civil courts.
And we have about 3 minutes left in the conversation with Christine Niles from churchmilitant.com. Before we go, the other thing is comparing this situation here with the situation with Father James Altman. It seems kind of bizarre that Father James Altman is being attacked for being a faithful priest, whereas others are able to get away essentially scot-free, and everybody shouts disobedience to Father Altman, but no one shouts disobedience to these other priests. Could you speak on that?
Absolutely, that's very true. I mean, for instance, there was a good article recently, I think it's in Crisis, called The Tale of Two Father James. One compares the treatment of Father James Altman, who's a faithful priest. Granted, he's very, he speaks out pretty strongly. And then you got Father James Martin. And Father James Martin is welcomed in dioceses almost everywhere. And the bishops don't seem to say anything about him, even though he is pushing homosexuality. That's his whole thing. He wants to normalize homosexuality. And in spite of all his language about, we just need to welcome. That's not true. He goes way farther than that. If you listen to any of his talks, he goes way farther. He wants the church to change its teaching on blessing same-sex unions, things like that, and marriage. And then you got Father James Altman, who's very faithful, granted, very, outspoken and everything, but he's a very manly priest. And yet here he is condemned by his own bishop, condemned by my archbishop here in Detroit as divisive, but they won't explain how he's been divisive. I know we have to end soon, but we did a very recent story about how we kind of obtained a private meeting between the archbishop's representative and a local group that had asked him to be their keynote speaker. And the archbishop wanted him canceled. They wanted them to cancel him, don't invite him to Detroit because he's divisive. But then he wouldn't answer questions as to how he's divisive. So,
yeah, it seems like the times we live in become more and more divided or divisive, as you say, every single day. But do you see a rise in the lay faithful sort of getting really sick and tired of all of the shenanigans?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And that's the good thing. So we have little groups, lay groups all over the place now, sort of acting and speaking respectfully. You have to be respectful, of course, to your bishop, but making their voices heard more. Because at this point, after the Summer of Shame, a lot of bishops have lost trust and credibility. They have to earn that back. They can no longer sit back and just expect all of us to trust them because they've lost so much of our trust. They've got to earn it. And a lot of laity now are kind of demanding that. So that's good.
Yeah, amen. We have a viewer hanging out with us on YouTube who actually said, quote, I knew a priest who was moved to Canada from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He ended up abusing me and likely others. Incredible. All right, check out this special report from Christine Niles over at churchmilitant.com. It's on Edward Loch out of